ESPN NHL writer Ryan S. Clark on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline. Ryan, how's it going?
Good. How are you two doing this afternoon?
Wonderful. Happy to have you. We've got a lot to cover with this team. Going to start with the draft, but plenty of questions about trades and a new coach and a front office. The NHL draft, obviously, later tonight in LA. Kraken sitting there at pick number 8. What feels like either the expected move or the right move to you for them there?
So they could go in one of two directions here, and the thought is, could it be defensemen? When you think about where the Kraken are with their prospect pool, it's one of the stronger groups in the NHL, and it's because you have Berkeley Catton, Carson Rakoff, Jagger Firkus, you name it, Edward Chalet, but that's the thing is they're all forwards. When you look at who their best prospects are, you wonder if they could make a move in defense. So at 8, there's 2 players that seem like they make the most sense, and they're names that people could be familiar with around here. One is Radim Mrtka, who, of course, is the Seattle Thunderbirds defenseman, who is a hulking 6'6", 218 pounds, 35 points, 43 games, playing in the WHL this year after previously spending his career in Czechia, where he's from. He's played for the Czech junior national team at the World 18s. This is someone that has a lot of talent, a lot of upside, but then they could also go in the direction of Jackson Smith. So he plays for the Tri-City Americans. He's 6'3", 190. So then 2 players with size on that back end. He's a little bit more of a puck mover as well. 54 points, 11 goals in 68 games. He's going to be one of those WHL players who's going to be going to college hockey, playing at Penn State next season. But if they don't go that direction and they decide to go with a forward, if Jake O'Brien is available, he's another name to look out for. He would give them another center in addition to what they already have with Matty Beniers and Shane Wright. He would give them another playmaker, someone who had 98 points in 66 games last year. So there's going to be a decision made if it's those 3, if those 3 are still around. But it's really a question of, do you want to load up on another forward or take another defenseman to add more depth to that talented prospect pool?
Hey, how much influence do you think Lane Lambert has when it comes to picking these players? You know, obviously, we're new to hockey in this area, and you know, going off of what we see with the NFL teams, when Pete was here, he had influence. I think Mike McDonald has influence when working with the GM over there with the Seahawks. What is it like in this situation? Is it standard for the coach to have a lot of influence, or is it just something Lane Lambert has or hasn't? Like, fill me in with how this works.
Sure. So the way it works with a lot of teams is there are coaches who do have input. They are involved in the draft. They sit at the table. But it's so different than the NFL, because if you're an NFL head coach, these players that you're drafting now, you're expecting to be on the roster, at least 4 or 5 of them, by the time the season starts. But you expect all of them to be there during camp, workouts, whatever, because there's a greater chance they're going to play right away. With the NHL draft, there might be 3 or 4 guys at most from this year's draft class who play in the NHL. Those are usually the numbers. And the NHL draft works a lot more like, let's say, the Major League Baseball draft, where you're talking about players that are in some cases between 2 to 5 years away. And so that's the thing, is a coach is going to have input, but it's with the understanding that you're taking the input of not just the coach, but your scouting directors, your scouting staff, everyone, because it's not even just about how does this player fit into the team right now, assuming they are able to play right now and are ready, but it's about where do they fit into the franchise 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the road.
Speaking of Lambert, what kind of coach is Seattle getting? What did you think of the hire?
So what they're getting is someone in New York who definitely did have success before they decided to go into a different direction, because his final season there went through a series of challenges. But what you're going for with Lane Lambert is someone who's going to provide consistency, or at least it appears so, because when you think about the Kraken, that's really been the biggest problem. When you talk to people throughout the league about what are the Seattle Kraken, like, no one really knows at this point, because the consistent theme is they're a team that's missed the playoffs. And someone's even wondered, did making the playoffs, was that the best thing for them in year 2? Or did it kind of hurt where they were going, because it left them in this situation in which you can see the potential, but was it too much too early? And so with Lane Lambert, you're trying to find consistency. You're on your 3rd coach in as many years. You hire Dan Bilesma with the hope that things would change. You really didn't see a lot of change, which is one of the reasons you move on. You bring in Lane Lambert. He's going to bring in his own staff. They retain Jessica Campbell. I know we're going to get into some of the moves that the new front office has made already, but you're doing it with the hopes that you can establish consistency, because for as competitive as the Western Conference is, it's also been a conference in which the last few years have shown, and the Kraken know because they've done it, just because you missed the playoffs one year doesn't mean you can't be in the conversation the next.
What do you feel about the move that the Kraken just made? Sorry if I jack his name up. Frederick Gaudreau from the Wild. 32 years old, 37 points, 18 goals, 19 assists. This feels like a move that doesn't really move the needle. Just kind of fills a void. He's a forward. You talk about how this team needs a defenseman over there. What are your thoughts on this move?
Okay, so with Frederick Gaudreau, he's someone that can help you right now. And he fits with what you're looking for in that he is a two-way center. So, one, you can use him on the penalty kill. He can anchor your bottom six. But the other thing that Frederick Gaudreau can do is he can provide secondary and tertiary offense, which if you're a team in the NHL, you can't get enough of. Of course, the Kraken made strides going from what they were in the lower third of the league in Dave Haxall's last season to last season, they were league average in goals. It's just the defense was an issue. And so by bringing in someone like Frederick Gaudreau, like, yes, you're able to get goals, but you're also able to get consistency down the middle in a two-way center who's had some really responsible years throughout his career. Because when you look at what the Minnesota Wild did, that is a team that knows the value of defensive consistency, because for a team that has struggled to score goals, even more so when they lost Gabriel Kaprizov, a two-way identity is how they got into the playoffs, and someone like Frederick Gaudreau can very much help you in that regard.
I know that superstars obviously make your team better, so with that context already established, when you look at the Kraken as a roster, do they just not have the pieces to push themselves into the playoffs? Last year, Ryan, we heard so much about maybe players kind of checking out, maybe not pushing themselves as hard, where I was wondering, is it a performance thing? I guess I'm asking, what will make them a playoff team in your mind?
Well, one is establishing defensive consistency, which is bizarre to say because that was their hallmark under Dave Haxall. But last year, even with as well as Joey Daccord played and Philip Grubauer did at times, and even then it's strange to say that because he might have had one or two games, but there's a reason he got sent down to the AHL. The defensive consistency was an issue last year. And look, does it help to have stars in this league? Absolutely. Look at the Florida Panthers, the Edmonton Oilers, the Dallas Stars. They're all examples of what it means to have stars. But if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, and again, they've got stars, maybe not superstars, but Jacob Slavin is a star. Seth Jarvis is a star. Svechnikov is a star. It shows that you don't necessarily need superstars. But what the Kraken need is they definitely need more consistency from their top six, from their defensemen. Yes, Joey Daccord had another strong year, which is why he played for Team USA. It's why he could possibly even be in the conversation for who goes to the Olympics with goaltending in America, because at this stage, that's a completely separate conversation than what it was even 3 months ago. But that being said, it's about how do you get consistency from your roster, and that's when you look at the decision to bring in Frederick Gaudreau and Mason Marchment. Those are two players that are consistent with the idea that if you're the Kraken, what else can you do between now and when free agency starts to help you attain that consistency even more?
You know, during like the post-season like exit interviews, I guess, I've spoken to a couple people affiliated with the organization, and we've heard quotes from players. And despite their record, despite the perception that we have of the Kraken, they make it seem like they're not too far off. But you know how this thing goes, right? As an organization, you're not going to sit there and be like, yeah, we're bad. You know, I don't know what we're doing over here. You got to find some positivity in that. And you mentioned some of the young talent that they already have. How far off do you think they are? And do you feel like the comments were genuine or just, you know, postseason talk to keep people invested?
Well, but that's the thing is anything is possible. So you look at where the Kraken were. They finished 20 points out of the wild card spot. That's a significant gap. But when you look at the teams that were between them and the St. Louis Blues, starting with the Blues had missed the playoffs for 3 seasons, one more season, and that would have set a new franchise high for most consecutive seasons without the playoffs. The Calgary Flames missed the playoffs, and they scored the most points in league history without making the playoffs. Utah, before it was Arizona, had sort of struggled, and yet they got really close. Anaheim, with the moves it's made, looks like it could be a playoff team. So it is entirely possible that with a new coaching staff, with players you bring in, with the idea that maybe a new staff can bring in some different ideas, that it can lead to consistency. So you understand the optimism of why they believe, hey, they're not far off. But at the same time, it's met with the reality of, but what can they do to close that gap? Because when you look at Anaheim, it's obvious what Anaheim is doing to close that gap. You look at Utah, especially this week with the move to get J.J. Peterka, it's clear. Of course, you're curious to see what the Flames do, what the Blues do, what more the Canucks end up doing to improve upon a 90-point season as they lost Mrtka because he heads to Philadelphia. So that's just it with the Kraken, is what more are they going to do?
Speaking of what more they are going to do, Kraken GM Jason Gaudreau said to King 5 he wasn't that impressed with the free agent market. So that's Jason's point of view. How do you see the market? Is there a name or two that are especially intriguing to you, maybe even for Seattle?
That's the thing is, Bill Guerin had a quote the other day, the general manager of the Wild, and he's like, everything thinks they've got a shot this year, so who knows what's going to happen on July 1st. Of course, that's paraphrasing it. But in terms of what the market looks like for what the Kraken are seeking, it could be trades might be their best bet. And that's why when you look at the Mason Marchment trade, that's what made it such a smart move for them, because number one, he's a player that's had consecutive 22-goal seasons. Dallas was in a cap crunch. There are a lot of teams that are in a cap crunch, especially those teams that are championship contenders. And so if you can find a way to provide them cap relief while making yourself better, you do it. But then it's also about asset management, because, yes, the thing that makes Mason Marchment happen is you're able to move on from Andre Burakovsky, because Burakovsky, granted he'd been injured, I believe had between 30, 33 goals over the last 3 years. Mason Marchment had 22 last year alone. And Mason Marchment is $4.5 million. Burakovsky's 5.5 with 2 years left. You can get Marchment off your books next season. Those are the sort of moves that if you're the Kraken, you're trying to take a look at, because you want to get those players that you think can make you better. But at the same time, you at least want to give it a year before committing any further. So it's not saying that the Kraken couldn't do something in free agency, because every team's going to try. But at the same time, it seems like those sort of trades where they can take advantage of a team's cap situation while filling your own needs, it seems like that might be the strongest route forward for them.
Hey, a few years ago, the NFL moved from 16 games to 17, and it feels like they're going to move to 18. When you have such a short season, I think the impact is real. NHL's moving from 82 to 84. What does 2 games do in such a long season?
Well, one, it cuts the amount of preseason games from 6 to 4, which if you talk to people, that is a victory. You might be surprised. Not everyone loves the preseason. Who knew?
Shocking.
But what it does is it cuts the preseason. It gives you 2 extra games. And with those 2 extra games, who knows? Because, let's take this year's wild card race alone. You don't think the Calgary Flames would love to have an extra 2 games? Or maybe if you're the Minnesota Wild, you're like, we do not want 2 extra games, because they had 2 teams chasing them with 96 points and the Wild had 97. It's the same thing in the East. If the Columbus Blue Jackets had 2 more games, maybe they're in the playoffs rather than the Montreal Canadiens, or maybe, again, it's something else. So that's the value of those 2 games. But it's going to be really interesting to see how those other 2 games work, in the sense of, what does this mean for records? What if someone breaks a long-standing record? Does it get devalued less because of extra 2 games, or does it matter? Because, again, these are the things that we talk about later down the road. But really, it's that opportunity for 2 more games that cuts the preseason down, but also for those teams that are on the cusp, it's 2 more opportunities to get in, or in some cases, maybe not get in.
NHL draft tonight in LA. Kraken own pick number 8. He is ESPN NHL writer Ryan S. Clark. Read his work at ESPN.com. Thanks, Ryan. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan.
No problem. Thanks for having me.